Well, you guys missed just tons of brilliant things that I said. I will start over. Well, you guys missed just. Oh, don't do that. They don't want double sound. Okay. I've got those muted. You know, one of these days I'll actually know what I'm doing. Jimmy, good to see you. Chet and Connie, great to have you. Zoe Shalkovich, I hope you are doing well. Yeah, I was saying the thing I was actually talking about was Chet's comment about the heat. I just turned the AC down lower. It's 72. This house is really well insulated. It stays the same. I mean, unless it's extreme temperatures, it does a really good job. But it stayed 72 all day without running air conditioner or heat. But upstairs is where my office is. It's a bonus room above the garage, and it shares the attic. There's a really good door with lots of ceiling, but anyway, it's normally it's hotter up here. It doesn't even matter if it's cold outside. So I had to turn the AC on because I was sweating, and I think I'm going to get some powder and start wearing it so that you guys don't have to deal with all this shine, or maybe I'm just letting my light shine, letting my weird shine. Ruben, good to see you. Misty, glad you could make it. Candace, Joel, hope you're doing okay. Becky, hope you and Bill are well. You know, I had a moment of not panic, but I thought I had a problem, and that is, since we're doing Tuesdays at 7 and Thursdays at 3, we may start getting different crowds of people. You know, at least a few people who, for instance, can't be here at 7 on Tuesdays, or who can't be here at 3 on Thursdays. And I thought that maybe we should do 2 different studies or do something different instead of, because the people that can't be here would miss it. Anyway, after debating for about a half an hour of what I should do, I remembered that these are all recorded and they are available on Facebook and YouTube. And if you miss one, you can watch it. So, yeah, we'll just keep going the way we're going. See, I was worrying about one of tomorrow's troubles when today had trouble enough. I am drinking hot tea. Maybe that's why I was hot. Oh, today's a fun look. Here is a link to, you can click that link and get the scripture that we'll be looking at today. If you're on YouTube, I'll just tell you what to search for. Search Google. Okay. You know, I learned something. I don't even know how I got to it. When you wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, by 6 or 7 o'clock, you can be anywhere on the internet. I forget what I was looking up or what led me to this, but I remember a while back, Google was telling people not to call searching for things on the internet Googling, that was not okay, that they wanted you to know that you were supposed to say that you searched on Google to find something. So I just wrote over on YouTube, instead of write Google ECC 6 NRSV, I said search Google for. But I learned that the reason that they, I thought it was weird at the time. Wouldn't you think they would want it to be a household name? I would have thought they would have wanted people to say Google all the time, even if they were using Yahoo or Ask Jeeves or whatever the hipsters are using. But it's the exact opposite of that. If a brand name becomes, if a company allows their brand name to become synonymous with an action or an item, they no longer can hold a copyright claim to that. So, for instance, since Kleenex never, I don't know for sure that this is true, but I'll give you an example that I think is true. And maybe it's different where you're from too. In Indiana, we never asked for a tissue. We asked for a Kleenex. it didn't matter. Kleenex is actually a brand. They have Scott's tissue, house brand. HEB has their own brand of tissue, facial tissue specifically. But that's not what we call them. We call them Kleenexes. And I suspect that over the years, Kleenex lost its trademark of that word. They probably still have it, but it's not enforceable in court. And that's why Google made a point of telling its users not to use Google as a verb, because if they did that and then Google became synonymous with searching, they would not be able to enforce copyright on it. So there is your worthless trivia that has nothing to do with Ecclesiastes for today. Ta-da! You can file that under Today I Learned. I always like that. I'm going to be 48 here in a little bit, and I can still learn new things every day. Zoe has a prayer request for her Uncle Paul. He's had some lower chest pressure and is scheduled to have an angiogram for possible cardiac stent placement later in the month. We will definitely keep your Uncle Paul in our prayers. Any other prayer concerns that we can mention and then lift up as we close today, which will be in a little bit, not just now. I didn't want anybody to think we were going to pray and then leave. I'm tired. I'll tell you what, I'm definitely glad that I'm doing the 7 o'clock thing on Tuesday and not Thursday, but I'm still tired. I'm just tired. Aren't y'all just tired, like in the provincial meaning of the word? Like, I don't know. Misty will know what I'm talking about. Some of you are too young, and some of you might be a little too old. But a big thing when I was growing up were cassette singles. So, a band releases an album. You could buy it on tape. That's when I was growing up. That's what most people did. Tapes were the big thing. But they would release whatever their top hit was on that album. And I tended to be more of a top 40 kind of guy than I know that would put me in low esteem with a lot of people. But I preferred 10 different bands, best first or second best songs versus every song of one band. So I never spent my money on a whole album that might cost, $7.99. But I would buy a single for $99. The same thing as the 45s, right? If you're older, you could buy a single on a 45. And when you flip the 45 over, there was a B-side. And the same thing with the cassettes. The back side of the cassette, the reverse side, would have another song that wasn't very popular. So they try to get people to like that song, request it on the radio, and improve it like that. So when I started driving in my car, I had a container that had about 60 cassette singles. And you could put in a song, and if you really liked it and you were going on a long drive, what would happen is if you had a pretty decent stereo, it would auto reverse. So basically the side A would play and say the song was, 3 minutes and 57 seconds. And then it would automatically play the back song, whatever it was. They tried to make it time out about the same. And then it would play the first song again, and then play the back song again, and then play the first song again. And you're always happy when the first song came by, but the back half was a drag, but it wasn't worth rewinding and flipping it over and doing all that. That's what I feel like life has become for me. I just feel like I'm on a short repeat, and parts of it are really good, and parts of it I'm just putting up with. But it just goes back, and it's the same thing again and again and again, and I'm getting kind of tired of that. Anybody else feeling the same? Can anyone relate? I bet Misty can relate. Although we have so much end of year paperwork coming up that Misty will long for the days when it was just cassette singles. All right. Well, Thank you. Let's go ahead and look at Ecclesiastes today. See if there's, hey, Cynthia. Cynthia's over on Google, or YouTube, sorry. The Google owns YouTube. I'm glad to know I'm not alone. Hopefully there will be a change. I'm really thinking, again, if things don't just blow up when, like in 2 weeks, now that kids have started school, I think I think that we'll be back in by Advent, maybe before. But I think Advent's kind of in my head what I'm shooting at. There's a lot of reasons for that. It's the very beginning of the Christian year. The Christian year begins the first Sunday of Advent. It's normally the first Sunday in December, but sometimes it's the last Sunday in November. It depends on how it falls. It just feels like that's a really reasonable goal. And as long as, and we might even have a vaccine by then. So that's what I'm hoping. I would love to start the Christian year back in the sanctuary. No, Misty, I'm sorry. I don't take resignations on Thursdays. And we're out tomorrow. You can try me on Monday. I'll have to check my calendar, but I don't think I'm taking resignations on Monday either. So I'll let you know. Okay, we're gonna start. So if you want to look at Ecclesiastes, you can. This is really interesting. I think, of course, I think the begets are interesting. So you'll have to be your own judge. So Koleth, we just left off at the end of verse 5, which concluded that possessions are a gift of God and that the ability to enjoy them is also a gift from God. So there's two different gifts from God. One is having lots of nice things, and the other is being able to enjoy them. And we all know people who have lots of nice things, but who don't enjoy them. They're always looking for the next thing, right? They can't enjoy what they have now. They're just, it's the search and the hunger for more that they want. So Koleth has said at the end of chapter 5 that likewise, all to whom God gives wealth and possessions, and whom he enables to enjoy them and to accept their lot and find enjoyment in their toil, this is a gift of God. So the ultimate gift is for God to bless you with things, for God to give you the ability to enjoy them, and for you to enjoy your work. Those three things together. So let's talk about that briefly in terms of the Deuteronomistic theology. So to remind you, if you haven't been part of those discussions, the Deuteronomistic theology was the idea that if you did good things, you would get good things. If you did bad things, you would get bad things. I had a good conversation with my friend, whose name is also Jonathan. He's a pastor in Mississippi, and we talk theology quite often. We are of the opinion that the people who are really focused on the Deuteronomistic theology were the people of the Israelite community, the Jewish community, who did not believe in an afterlife. So they believed that you got your reward on earth. If you did good things, you got good things. If you did bad things, you got bad things, and that's all there was to it. Probably did not believe in any kind of afterlife after that. What would be the purpose of an afterlife in a system like that? And then just remember implicit in the Deuteronomistic theology is the thought that if you have good things, it's because you're a good person. And if you have bad things happen to you, it's because you're a bad person. We know this is not true. We know that this is not how God works. Jesus taught us very differently. Jesus was constantly doing corrective theology. And one of the things that he taught us is that this idea of the Deuteronomistic theology was wrong. not only that, but really in all the books of wisdom, I mean, this is essentially what Job is about. Job is an outstanding man who had done nothing wrong in the eyes of God, and was a really good person. And the Hasatan, Satan, as we think of him now, then definitely a different figure than we have in our minds when we think of Satan. But the Hasatan, the adversary, said to God, "That's just because you gave him all this stuff. That's the only reason he worships you. If really bad things happen to him, then he'd be just as bad as everybody else." And that's how the book of Job goes, which is one of the books of wisdom, along with Proverbs, Psalms, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Solomon. The books of wisdom seem to, at least Job and Ecclesiastes very specifically, really, well, I'll say this, and then I'll have to mitigate what I say. I think they're both demonstrating that the Deuteronomistic theology was absolutely incorrect. Now, there are different interpretations of Ecclesiastes, and ultimately you have to decide on your own what you believe about Koleth. You have to decide whether you believe that he believes in fatalism, that it's all just predestined and life is just suffering, and that there's really nothing worth doing, or you have to believe, you don't have to believe anything, or you can believe that Koleth believes in free will and in doing good for its own sake. But tied up in this also is the idea of sort of what camp Koleth might have been in, whether he was in that Deuteronomistic camp that would not have believed in an afterlife, or whether he was part of the part of the faith that became the Pharisees, who believed that there was an afterlife and that everybody who died went to Sheol. We heard that in the books of Psalm. It's translated as hell sometimes, very incorrectly. It is not hell as we understand hell at all. But it was a place to await the resurrection. So I have said the day that Koleth, one of the days that Koleth was going on and on about how ridiculous and meaningless and futile life was. Hey, Jack and Dorothy, good to see you. And Jeannie, your grandson's first birthday is today. That is a celebration indeed. I think, well, anyway, in the midst of that, a couple of people at the same time said that it sounded like Koleth was clinically depressed. And I said that that's possible, but I think it was somebody who was shedding the skin of that Deuteronomistic theology, who had discovered that was not really true. And he says that several times. He says it's not true. You can do good things all the time and still have bad things happen to you, and it's absurd. To me, it's his way of saying that the Deuteronomistic theology, that understanding of God, is absurd. That it's in vain to think that that's the way God is. You can't. It just doesn't work. And if that's the case, then what we have is somebody who's have his entire theological foundation ripped out from underneath him, and he's kind of rebuilding it on the fly, and that's what we're seeing in this book. So that would mean that he is somebody who is moving from the idea of there not being an afterlife to the idea that there is an afterlife, and that the things that you do on earth might have repercussions beyond just the here and now. So it's really interesting when you look back at a person, in this case, Koleth, the teacher. I think the first time a historical figure is what I'm trying to say. The first time I really realized this is when we were studying John Wesley's journals in United Methodist history, and you saw a journal entry. He kept a journal throughout his whole life. So you could see the difference between his journal entries when he was 20 and when he was 60. And he believed different things in those times. So when you look back and you say, well, Wesley believed this, that's not necessary. I mean, at what point did he believe that? Is that a belief that he changed at some point during his life, or is that the belief that he settled on? And is there a place where you can find something that refutes that? So I think that in that same way, especially if Koleth is really in the midst of transformation here, if that is what's going on, and I'm not saying that it is. I can't know for sure. Nobody else is saying that it's what's going on, but it's one way that we have interpreted what we're reading, is that he's finally come to the understanding that the Deuteronomistic theology is incorrect. It's failed him, and he's trying to figure out what actually has meaning in life, and he's finding the whole thing absurd. We're going to get some back and forth as he struggles with what it all means. And this is one of those back and forth chapters. And it really does, where it's going to hinge on one particular verse that is going to lead us down the path of trying to figure out whether Koleth believed in an afterlife or whether he did not. And a lot of interpretation changes based on what you believe in that. Interestingly, I will say that I believe he is making this change, that he is not a Deuteronomistic theologian anymore, that he is a Pharisee of his days, not in the negative term that we've come to call Pharisees, but as opposed to the Sadducees. Couldn't get the word out. So I'm trying to lay down that foundation. I don't want to go too deep before we get very far, but I think that'll give us a little bit of a lens with which to view this chapter. So it begins, there is an evil. So the first thing that he's doing is he's describing something that is an evil. There is an evil. I wish that I knew Hebrew because I'm really interested. I guess it's just evil. I can't give it any nuance because I don't know of any other nuance for it. There is an evil I have seen under the sun, and it lies heavy upon humankind. Those to whom God gives wealth, possessions, and honor, so that they lack nothing of all that they desire, yet God does not enable them to enjoy these things, but a stranger enjoys them. This is vanity. This is meaningless. This is absurd, depending on how you want to translate that word hebel that the NRSV translates as vanity. And then he says it is a grievous ill. So what is he really saying here? From a straightforward reading, he is saying that there are people that God gives really good things to, but he doesn't give them the ability to enjoy them. He gives that to a stranger instead. So if we take this as a straightforward assertion that this is what Koleth believes, then I think that's pretty strong evidence that he's not believing in the Deuteronomistic theology. Otherwise, if God were giving a person wealth, possessions, and honor, it would be because that person was a good person, and therefore God would also give that person the ability to enjoy those things. But he's saying that there's an evil that happens where God will give people all these things, but not even let them enjoy it and just give it to a stranger. And the stranger could be anybody, good, bad, indifferent. So if you come at it straight on, I think that Koleth does not fall into the camp of I'll just use the language of the Sadducees and the Pharisees. He would be in the camp of the Pharisee who does not subscribe to the Deuteronomistic theology. So what else could he be saying? Because this is a serious charge. I mean, he's basically accusing God of evil. That's not possible by our definition of evil and our understanding of God. So it makes me wonder what he could be thinking of. Let's say that he doesn't. Well, I don't know how else to say it. He does, it's what he says. He says, God gives wealth, possessions, and honor, so they lack nothing, all they desire. But God does not enable them to enjoy these things, but a stranger enjoys them. So, I mean, he's saying it. Maybe he's saying it sarcastically. I don't know. I find it very hard to believe that with a straight face, he is saying that God has wrought an evil upon God's people. But let's continue. Hey, Janice, praying for Jeremy, who's going through chemo and radiation, who's very young. We will definitely pray for Jeremy. Verse 3. A man may beget 100 children and live many years, but however many are the days of his years, if he does not enjoy life's good things or has no burial, I say that a stillborn child is better off than he. So here's, this is the same guy who said that the order of least happy to most happy are people who are living, people who were dead, and the people who were never born. He is really struggling with life as he writes this. And when I say struggle, I mean he may be actually struggling with life like we might think of. He's struggling with the philosophical understanding of what the meaning of life is. Like, it's really important to him as he's exploring this to figure it out, and he's really struggling with it. I don't understand the has no burial. Nobody really understands what that means. Theoretically, a rich man would have in those days would have had an elaborate funeral. So maybe I'm not going to try to explain it. The translation is so weird that people don't really understand exactly what it says. So basically saying that you could have 100 children and having children and having your line continue was one of the most important things to the Israelites throughout their entire history. A lot of scriptures are built upon that understanding. The entire book of Ruth is built upon that understanding. One of Ruth's biggest problems is that she doesn't have anyone that will continue her line. Abram and Sarai, who become Abraham and Sarah, not having children, not having a legacy to leave behind. So having 100 children, that's 100 legacies. That would be amazing. And live many years. And who doesn't want to live many years? Except for Koleph. Probably doesn't want to live many years based on what he says. But anyway, it doesn't matter how long he lives. If he doesn't enjoy life's good things, a stillborn child is better off. So he's really digging into the life is suffering motif that he returns to all the time. If you cannot enjoy the things that you're given and enjoy the work that God gives you as well, then your entire existence is meaningless. And I've said that I don't want to translate Hubble as meaningless because it's so negative that I'd like to take us in at least a sideways direction, if not a positive direction. So I guess you could say at best, if you can't do those things, your life is absurd. It's absolutely absurd. If you can't enjoy the things that you have, if you can't enjoy life, if you can't enjoy the work with which God has given you, then your whole life is just completely absurd. He says, and this is of the stillborn child, he says, it comes into absurdity, vanity, and goes into darkness, and in darkness its name is covered. Moreover, it has never seen the sun or known anything, yet it finds rest rather than he. Now that's interesting. So again, he's comparing a stillborn child to a man who's had 100 kids and doesn't have a burial. So maybe I guess I was assuming that the man was dead and didn't have a burial. Maybe the man is still alive. Maybe that's what it means. I don't know why the commentator didn't say that was a possibility if it is. But I think that has to be what he means. Because what he's saying is that the stillborn child has found rest and the other man hasn't. So I guess that's how we'll interpret has no burial. We'll say it means that he's not died yet. So if you're very old and you just aren't enjoying life, you are far worse off than a stillborn child, one who was never born, as he has said before. Because the one who was never born, the one who was stillborn, has finally found rest, and the man who has not yet died is not resting; he's struggling. He continues, even though he should live 1,000 years twice over, yet enjoy no good, do not all go to one place? So this is the beginning of an argument that I'm going to make that brings a little bit of positivity and hope to Ecclesiastes in general and to Koleth specifically in this chapter. Hey, Sue from St. Joe and Mo, good to see you. Doesn't our ability of free will render us the ability to acquire things, and yet because problems sometimes keep us from enjoying them? Well, I mean, the question of free will is definitely at odds here. So Koleth is very specifically saying, and again, like I said, maybe it's ironic, maybe he's saying it ironically, but he's saying that there are those to whom God has given wealth, possessions, and honor, so they lack nothing, but God does not enable them to enjoy these things. So Koleth in this particular chapter seems to be going back to that fatalism, that he goes back and forth between fatalism and free will. When we read the first part of Ecclesiastes 3, for instance, he seems to suggest there is some free will for us. In this particular chapter, he's saying that God's in charge of it. God gave the wealth and the possessions and the honor, and God made them not enjoy it. But to answer your question specifically, I mean, I definitely believe we have the ability of free will. So I could take that part out of your question. And basically what I understand you asking, Chet, is don't we have the ability to acquire things, but because of some problem or other would keep us from enjoying them? And yeah, that's, I mean, absolutely. You could, anything could happen. I'm trying to think of something ironic from literature. Anyway, you could spend your whole life I'm just running short on examples. You could spend your whole life acquiring certain things. Let's say that you assembled the best library known to humanity. Everybody knew you for how amazing your library was. And then you got old and you got cataracts and you couldn't read, and you had all those books and you could never read them. That would be a case where it wasn't even a matter of free will. It's just something that happens. You could go out and stare at the sun for an hour and go blind. You have the free will to do that. And you might have all these books and be blind because you used your free will to go out and stare at the sun. There are certainly things we can do to keep ourselves from enjoying life. I think what's unique about this particular book or chapter of Ecclesiastes is that Koleth is very specifically saying that God is the being who is not enabling the person who's given much to enjoy it. So, and then also, today it's almost a mental illness that some people have, where they just always want more. They're never content with what they have. They want something so badly. They want a specific car more than anything else. And once they get that car, they'll finally be happy, and they work and work and work. And then finally they put a down payment, get a ridiculous interest rate, and they get that car and they've got it and they drive it around the block. And then they say, you know what? I really wish I'd gotten that car instead. I mean, there are a lot of people who are like that. And like I said, it's, maybe mental illness isn't the right word to yet, but that it's something on that spectrum. It's a horrible thing not to ever be content. But again, in our context today, Koleth is saying that it's God doing it. There's an evil I've seen under the sun, and it lies heavy upon humankind, those to whom God gives wealth, possessions, and honor, so they lack nothing of all that they desire, yet God does not enable them to enjoy these things. So again, it seems like he's just ripped between the concept of deuteromistic theology and something different. It doesn't make any sense that God would give people something and then not let them enjoy it. And it doesn't. That is absurd. We believe in free will, almost, not everyone for sure. There are definitely fatalists today. There are neo-Calvinists who don't believe in free will. There are people who don't believe that there are people who believe that, if you believe that everything's already written and God knows everything that's going to happen from now, step by step until the end of time, then do we really have, it's a whole discussion. Most of us believe that we have free will. That's one of the ways that we enjoy our life, is that we actually believe that we're making decisions that matter. That's part of what gives life meaning. So we believe in free will. So, but we're looking at Koleth here. So I don't know if that answers your question, Chet, or if it helped further I think it helped further the discussion. I don't know if I touched upon what you were talking about or not, but feel free to let me know and I'll move on. So this is where we get to this interesting part. Even though this man should live 1,000 years twice over, if he doesn't enjoy it, how is he any better than the stillborn? Because don't everybody go to one place? Well, that's the question. What is that one place? If at this point in the history of the Israelites, you are steeped into that deuteronomistic theology, I want to look up something. See, the Sadducees, and again, the Sadducees were the people who are really steeped in deuteronomistic theology, who probably did not believe in an afterlife at all. And the Pharisees were the people who were still steeped in deuteronomistic theology, but believed in an afterlife. And so they were letting their grasp go a little bit, I guess. But I'm using the terms anachronistically, or whatever that real word is, because the Sadducees didn't really come into being until about 170 BC, and Koleth is writing in about 250. So he's writing before that idea. But this is so important to coming up with an understanding of what Koleth is trying to say, that I just want to make sure that we're on the same, that we have that background. So I won't use the words Sadducees and Pharisees anymore because they're not quite yet on the scene. But the fact that he says, I'm sorry, I've lost it. There we go. Do not all go to one place. If you did not believe in an afterlife, well, I don't know. I guess if you didn't believe in an afterlife, the one place would theoretically be the ground. But that seems a little too general. When Koleth says don't all go to one place, that makes me think of Sheol. I don't know what else he could be talking about other than Sheol. So it seems to me that Koleth believes in Sheol, a place where all souls go until the resurrection would happen. Of course, he would not know of Jesus, but they still had the prophecies and would believe that at one point there would be resurrection. So the rest of this scripture kind of hinges on that, and we're going to get more. So stick with me. The very next verse says, "All human toil is for the mouth, yet the appetite is not satisfied." So this becomes a very interesting passage based on what we just talked about. Hey, Luanna, it's good to see you. There is an idea by many translators that because there is the indefinite article "the" on this passage, Okay, sorry. In the Hebrew, we don't see it here, but in the Hebrew, it really says all human toil is for his or its mouth, not the mouth. The translation is the mouth, which parallels the appetite. So we have a nice English translation that says all human toil is for the mouth, yet the appetite is not satisfied. And that makes sense, straightforward, because we work so we can eat, and yet we're always working more. We're continually hungry. We can eat, but 6 hours later we're going to be hungry again. The hunger never stops. Our hunger can never be satiated once and for all. And so the human toil can never stop because we always have to eat. However, there is, again, because the Hebrews actually would say all human toil is for its mouth or his mouth, there are many who believe that this is referring to Sheol again, which is what was often referred to as the entrance to Sheol was the mouth. So since it's just said, even though they should live 1,000 years twice over, yet no good, don't all go to one place. That's a rhetorical question. The answer is yes, they all go to Sheol. And so then he says all human toil is for the mouth of Sheol. It all goes to that. No matter what you do, whatever you work, how long you work, how hard you work, eventually you're going to end up at the mouth of Sheol. It doesn't matter if you were rich and had everything and enjoyed it, if you were rich and had everything and hated it, or if you never had a thing and enjoyed it, or if you never had a thing and hated it, or if you were if you were stillborn, you're still going to end up at the mouth of Sheol with everybody else. So that is certainly a fatalistic outview. Is that the right word? It's definitely a fatalistic view, but it is of all the Israelites of the day, it's definitely the most forward-looking one. They were looking forward to a time of resurrection when they would leave Sheol. So even though that sounds horribly fatalistic, it's less fatalistic than the Deuteronomistic theologians who believed that whatever you got, it was in this life. So you better do good things so that you get good things. If you do bad things, you're going to get bad things. And when you die, you're dead. And that's all there is to it. So it depends on whether you think Koleth is a dyed-in-the-wool Deuteronomistic theologian, or whether he's shedding that and trying to find something new to replace it, which I have said has been my interpretation of reading Koleth, that he's had that foundation ripped out and he's trying to replace it with something that makes sense. And all he's finding as he searches is absurdity. And that's what happens to us when we have some foundation that we have believed our entire life. If we suddenly find out that that's not true, everything does seem absurd for a while. And so we're going to have to stick with Koleth. And it doesn't seem like he's going to change his spot, so to speak, at this point, but we're going to stick with him and see where he goes to. So then he says, what advantage have the wise over the fools? And what do the poor have who know how to conduct themselves before the living? Better is the sight of the eyes than the wandering of desire. This is also absurd. It's just a puff. It's chasing the wind. And he says, and chasing after wind. So we'll use that word absurd. So basically this little chunk says all human toil is for the mouth, yet the appetite is not satisfied. So you can take that to mean all human toil is so that we can be satisfied, but we are never satisfied with life. Or you can take it much more broad religiously and say all human toil leads to the same place. It all leads to Sheol. And the mouth of Sheol is never satisfied. The Sheol can never be filled. It will take soul after soul after soul. And that being the case, what advantage do the wise have over fools? And what do the poor have who know how to conduct themselves before the living? What difference does it make? Better is the sight of the eyes than the wandering of desire. This is a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. It's just a parallel of that statement. Better is the sight of eyes than the wandering of desire. Better to have a bird in the hand than two in the bush. And he says this is also absurd and chasing after one. One thing I learned in writing in college and especially in seminary is that you should never have the phrase and this is why or and that is why, because you don't know what exactly we're referring to. And we have that problem here. Koleth says this is also a vanity. Well, what does he mean? Does he mean that the proverb, a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush is absurd? Or does he mean that the wandering of desire is absurd? It's hard to tell. All of it, as far as he's concerned, is meaningless. I'm not translating the word Hebel here. I'm paraphrasing Koleth's statements. It's all meaningless because everybody's going to end up in the same place. Okay, let's continue. We live in the reality of needing beneficiaries. In what way, Chet? I like the conversation. Let's keep it up. I'll continue on and let me know what you mean by that. We live in the reality of needing beneficiaries. I mean, there are people who, and that's what Koleth is struggling with, certainly, but even today there are people who don't have beneficiaries. Well, I mean, I guess they do. Do you mean just in general that we want the idea that everything that we've collected will go, okay, to care for those who follow us? We need beneficiaries to care for those who follow us. This is one of those times where it'd be so much better if we were sitting in a room together. I don't quite understand. I don't think you're saying that we need beneficiaries to take care of us. There are people who don't have beneficiaries who do just fine. We definitely want the feeling that the things that we've acquired in this world will go to some worthy cause, whether that worthy cause is our children or our church or a museum or the public or the state or something, depending on what we believe. I'm not sure about the word needing. Yeah. And that's one of the things. I'm with you. I think, Chet. I don't know if I agree with a universal thought that we have to have. I guess I do. I guess that's what I'm just saying. Okay, I'm with you. I'm with you. So it's what I just said then, I guess, that we want to think that the things that we've acquired in our life will go to some worthy person or cause. And that is, Koleth a couple chapters ago threw a fit over the thought that someone could obtain all sorts of wealth and die and have all that wealth go to a fool. That the person who inherits your wealth might be some idiot that doesn't deserve it. He didn't say it was a great evil, but he said it was absurd when that happens. So Koleth definitely struggles with that. Okay, so let's go on. I like this too. The other idea, if we go back to verse 7, all human toil is for its mouth. The idea of that being Sheol, and that the appetite cannot be satisfied, comes from Proverbs chapter 30, verses 15 and 16. The leech, and nobody knows what that means, so it's okay. The leech has two daughters. Give, give, they cry. Three things are never satisfied. Four never say enough. So that's just an idiom used throughout Proverbs. Three are this, four is that. It's just saying, we'd say 100 people, same thing. Three are never satisfied. Four never say enough. Sheol, the barren womb, the earth ever thirsty for water, and the fire that never says enough. So as we know, California is burning, Colorado is burning. Fires often never say enough. They just consume and consume. There's never a time that they're satisfied. The earth is ever thirsty for water. We always need rain, and we always get rain eventually. It all averages out, not necessarily where we need it. The barren womb, again, going back to that idea for the Israelites, that the most important thing to them was having their family line continue. And then back to the first one, Sheol. So the Proverbs tell us that Sheol is never satisfied. And so that gives some credence to this translation that all human toil is for Sheol, yet Sheol's appetite is not satisfied. I think that's interesting. So, okay, we'll continue. Verse 10, whatever has come to be has already been named, and it's known what human beings are, and they're not able to dispute with those who are stronger. The more words, the more absurd. So how is one the better? So in this case, so much of Ecclesiastes harkens back to Job, which is interesting because Ecclesiastes is one of the newest writings we have from the Old Testament, or at least one of the newer writings. And Job is one of the oldest writings from the Old Testament. But they are definitely linked time and time again. And this is one of those cases. When Job complains, he says, if I'm being put on trial, at least let me speak to my accuser. He wants to find out why he's being punished, even though he didn't do anything to deserve it. And what God says to him is what Ecclesiastes says here, is that you can't dispute with somebody who's stronger than you. So we can't argue with God. It is what it is. Whatever has already, everything is there's nothing new under the sun. We go back to that. Whatever has come to be, it's whatever you see that somebody's got a name for it. It's known what human beings are. There's nothing new to discover. And we are never going to be able to argue with God. So if this is how it is, this is how it is. And then he says, for who knows what is good for mortals while they live the few days of their vain life, which they pass like a shadow. So this has been the question that Ecclesiastes has sought out from the beginning. I'm going to see if I can. Okay, back in Ecclesiastes 1, verse 12. I, the teacher, I, Koleth, when king over Israel and Jerusalem, applied my mind to seek and to search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. It's an unhappy business that God has given to human beings to be busy with. That's not what I was looking for. Where? Hang on a second. Stay with me, please. Okay, I'm sorry. It's the next chapter. I said to myself, I'll make a test of pleasure, enjoy yourself. But this was also absurd. I said, of laughter, it's mad, and of pleasure, what use is it? I searched with my mind how to cheer my body with wine, my mind still guiding me with wisdom, and how to lay hold on folly, until I might see what good for mortals to do under heaven during the few days of their life. His whole experiment that he did back in chapters 2 and 3, chapter 2 specifically, was trying to find out what good is there for mortals to do in their short life. That's what he wanted to find out. What good is there for mortals to do in their short life? And so here is his answer. His answer is, who knows? Who knows what is good for mortals while they live the few days of their vain life, which they pass like a shadow? For who can tell them what will be after them under the sun? And that's how that chapter ends. And it's really a bookend. The first chapter just sets up what Ecclesiastes, who he is, and what his worldview is. And then chapter 2, he sets out and says, I set my mind to it. I bolstered my body with wine. I was ready to go, and I was going to figure out, no matter what it took, I was going to figure out for everybody who ever came after me, I was going to figure out what's good to do for human beings, because their life is short. They work all the time, so I want to know what's good. And here he comes with a conclusion. He says, who knows? I don't know. It's almost as if he is giving up. Who knows what's good for mortals while they live in the few days of their vain life, which they pass like a shadow? For who can tell them what will be after them under the sun? So Ecclesiastes is, he is really caught up with this idea that Chet and I were talking back and forth with, about beneficiaries and about what comes next. But from Koleth's point of view, part of his frustrations is that we never know. We don't know whether our children, and this was probably more realistically the case in a time where the average life expectancy was, 30 or something. We wouldn't know whether our children were going to grow up to be wise or to be fools. We didn't know what happened after we died. Nobody had ever come back at this point in history. Nobody had ever come back to tell them what happened after they died. We live in a time where we know that Jesus died and returned and told us about it. So we live in a different world. He lived in a world in a time where there was the beginnings of sort of two different camps of Israelites in what they believed theologically. Some who believed that you got what you got in this world based on who you were, how you were, what you did, and there was nothing more. And people who still believed that, but also believed that when you died, you went to Sheol, and at some point you would be resurrected and presumably judged based on your life. Definitely the Pharisees still believed in the deuteronomistic theology. That's proven time and time again in the New Testament. But he's caught kind of in the middle. And I still think, as I read this, that he really is caught in the middle of those two camps. He's got one foot in each, and he's trying to figure out. And that is really the problem with sitting on the fence. Life is really confusing. You can't just take, it's not a cafeteria. We don't have a cafeteria theology where you take this piece and you take this piece and you'll take one of those and you'll have that for dessert, and that's going to be your faith. And so as he struggles with realizing that this deuteronomistic theology is not true, that there are people who can even have everything and then not enjoy it, which is worse than not having anything at all. The whole thing is absolutely absurd to Koleth. So this is, I just briefly want to close with, this has gone much longer than I thought it would. So ultimately this passage really, I don't want to say it's about, but it entails, it highlights, it's influenced by the struggle between free will and determinism that Koleth seems to struggle with. It seems to be deterministic because he says that God gives people the things, but then God doesn't give them the ability to enjoy it. But he calls that a great evil. And I really struggle with thinking that Koleth would believe that God could do a great evil. We know that in Job, God says that God created chaos, God created Leviathan. So I would have to have a better understanding of exactly what he meant by evil to dig down that particular hole. So I won't. The close of it suggests that you can't even argue, your lot in life is your lot in life. You can't argue it with God. He's stronger, bigger, better. Which is also true. But ultimately, if we believe, if what we get out of this chapter, which, like I said, it is the bookend to chapter 2 where we started, if what we believe is that Koleth is moving away from deuteronomistic theology, which is something we all need to do. There's plenty of deuteronomistic theology in life today. If we believe that Koleth is moving away from that, then that idea that Koleth actually does believe in Sheol, that Koleth actually does believe in an afterlife, I think gives the whole book up until this point a glimmer of hope that we haven't seen before. I honestly don't. I'm working one day ahead of you guys. I'm studying one day ahead. I've been through this chapter, this book of the Bible twice, but as is often the case at my age, I don't remember how it ends. I'm just playing it with you and learning with you. So we're going to see where Koheleth ends up at. But I see hope in this chapter. I see a man who is who's changing, and that change is rocking him at his foundation. And we see that in his writing when he talks about the absurdity of life. But life is about change and about deepening our understanding, and that's what he's seeking is a deeper understanding of God, life, and possibly, if the interpretation is correct, the afterlife. So that's Ecclesiastes chapter 6. So sorry, Chet, I hope that I hit somewhere on what you were talking about. I guess my stumbling block was needing beneficiaries. I believe we live in the reality of wanting beneficiaries. I guess it's the needing that I might have struggled with. Anyway, I'm not giving my kids any of it. I'm going to spend it all. They can fend for themselves. Anybody else have a prayer request before we close today? I actually thought today was going to be really short. It was not. All right, well, let's pray then. Holy God, we thank you for difficult words. This is probably one of the hardest books of your holy word that you've given to us to understand. And there's so much to be gained just in the effort to try to understand, even if we never walk away with a complete understanding. And I think it's clear that we're not going to. As we do this, we're growing closer to one another. We're growing closer to you. We're growing in our knowledge and understanding of who you are, and maybe even more importantly, who you are not. So I just pray that you continue to lead and guide us, that you open up our minds to the scripture, that you might give us some insight. Help us apply this too. That's one of the best parts about understanding the Bible is when we can apply it to our own lives. So a lot of this seems very difficult to apply to our lives. And I just pray that you would give us that wisdom to take what we've learned and to not only understand, but to use it, to employ it in our search for meaning in life. We lift up to you every name and situation that we spoke aloud, Lord. So many people today need your help. They need the absolute assurance of your presence. And so we pray that for each and every person, Lord. I pray for our nation. I pray for the fires that are burning, both metaphorically and literally, both naturally and unnaturally. It's such a rough time right now. I pray that you just lift us up. And I pray that you heal us and that you heal our land. We give the world to you, Lord, as you gave it to us. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. That's right. You can't take it with you, which is why I'm going to spend all of it. That's okay. I don't have much to spend anyway. Thank you all for joining us today. I know this gets kind of boggy. Like it's like trying to walk in mud, but all we have to do is keep taking steps. You just pick up your leg and take a step forward, and you keep moving. And eventually we're gonna get somewhere, and it's going to be meaningful. So stick with us. We'll be back on Tuesday at 7:00 to look at Ecclesiastes 7. So God bless, Godspeed, and as always, thanks for watching.